Welcome to Pepper Shock Media's Marketing Expedition podcast, keeping you up to date with the latest in marketing and advertising. Now here's your host, Rhea Allen.
Welcome to the Marketing Expedition podcast. I'm Rhea Allen, President and CEO of Pepper Shock Media, and your host of our podcast today. And with me is Christian Kilpatrick from Brick6 Creative. Welcome, Christian.
Thanks for having me.
So let's learn a little bit more about Christian. Who are you and where did you come from? And tell me more about you and your business.
Yeah, so I guess I'm an Idahoan. I don't know if you would say that. So I actually grew up here until I was about 8, and then moved away for quite a while, about 10 years, and was kind of like a military brat. I think that's the term.
You kind of boomeranged back, did ya? Okay,
yeah.
cool.
So my mom met my stepdad when we were in Mississippi, and my stepdad had just retired from the Marines, and basically decided like they weren't sure where they wanted to live, so we just kind of moved around from South Carolina to Florida to Mississippi, back to South Carolina. It was kind of crazy, but a heck of a learning experience. And then we moved back here when I was 18. So,
welcome back to Idaho.
Yeah, thank you. And then definitely been here since then. Yeah, I mean, as far as that goes, I guess in terms of working and sort of where I'm at now with everything, I'll just tell you that when I was a kid, I actually envisioned being a corporate lawyer until I realized that they make a lot of money, but they're like really depressed.
Oh dear.
And and not very. They're workaholics for the most part, right? And I think for me, like the biggest thing was like, I have this chance to make a lot of money, but over time I've realized money is not what's important to me. And so at this point, I graduated from BSU back in 2016. My undergrad was in supply chain management, so totally a different swing from corporate law. And the reason I even got into supply chain management is because during my time with BSU, statistically there was a huge deficit in this field specifically, and obviously supply chain is very vast, right? I mean, right. Logistics, procurement. You could even go as far as like marketing, sales, and all these different aspects to it. And so I really wanted to stick on like the operation side, sort of like manufacturing and more like the quality control type aspect. But as I started going through it, and so I finished my degree, and then I started working at this company, and it was really fun, but I realized like it just wasn't for me. It's an incredibly stressful industry to be in. So sort of after that, I went through like sales and customer service and all these different places. I went through finance for a while. There's obviously a lot of local companies that I've been with here. And then there were like Microsoft and Citibank, very large sort of conglomerates, if you will. And so at this point, I work full time at HealthWise, but I also founded Brick6 Creative. HealthWise, I mean, for those of you that don't know, so HealthWise is definitely a Boise, homebred company. And really what we do is we create healthcare content. And so my role with that is I'm on the operations side, where it's basically project management every day, quality control, process improvement, things like that. And sort of in the middle of this, like I kind of realized like communication, and not just, not that HealthWise specifically is like this place with bad communication, nothing like that, but just in general, like with different organizations and whatnot, communication is the key to everything. And if you ultimately can't communicate very well, it's very hard to sustain what it is that you're doing, whether it be your strategy or maintain the mission of your organization, or hire correctly or whatever, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's sort of where Brick6 Creative came from. Was really just I wanted to provide a way to allow people to communicate in a very open, sort of safe way, and obviously doing a very engaging and fun, proactive way. Active, not
mm-hmm.
proactive, very active and very hands-on way. And
it could be proactive too if you're going to circumvent something of a problem that could become a problem in the future. So
absolutely.
I guess it does both ways, right?
Yeah, definitely. And and so like where we're at right now is and obviously because we did that very
we had our session together.
We had a session together, and that's great. I'm glad we were able to do that. But what I want to get into like this very ongoing, continuous type situation where it's not just this one-off workshop. Right. I want to get to something where it's this very ongoing sort of series, if you will. I think we got some really good stuff out of it, but I think it's like the tip of the iceberg, right?
There's more to go.
There's
for
a lot
sure.
more to go, yeah. So I'd like to get to a point where, I'm working with companies and different people and whatnot and really get this ongoing sort of, again, the series or whatever you want to call it. But the other side to this too is, I'm really trying to expand Brick6 into not just this team building aspect and not just this sort of corporate problem solving aspect either. I want to do more than that. And there's a reason behind that, which I can get into if we have time. But so anyway, yeah, I'm looking to expand it. But right now, sort of the bread and butter is really just focusing on the team building, problem solving, again, really allowing people to communicate in a very safe, open way, kind of like what we're doing right now.
Right, and with Legos, right?
And with Legos, yeah.
Yes.
I guess that's something I should mention is
Yes.
that, I use Legos for everything. The reason I don't typically mention it initially is, so when I first started and I was like out and about, I would talk to people, I'd go to like the Boise Chamber,
networking
the
events.
what is it, Business After Hours or whatever, or, Toulouse or these different places. I would always throw out Legos and people were like baffled by that, to throw out like, okay, you mentioned Legos and the word business in the same sentence. Like, where did that come from,
And basically thinking, we're going to play with Legos.
Yeah.
Yes, but there's more to it than that.
Yeah, there's more
Quite
to
a
it than
bit
that. And that's the funny thing is I would say like, and I use this methodology that involves Legos.
Lego Serious Play.
It's called Lego Serious Play, yeah. And they would be just baffled by like where, like how, why, ask every single question, or they would ask absolutely no questions and just be like, okay, that's cool, and just kind of move on. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to keep that kind of under wraps because for me, the Legos is just a means to an end, right? It's not the most important aspect. It's really just the tools.
It's one of the tools that you can use.
Yeah, it's and there's different things that I use, different methodologies that it still involve the Legos, but yeah, it's not really the most important thing. Really, and what I would say is the most important thing is me asking the right questions and the facilitation aspect of it. And what I like to do is I like to challenge people as the best I can, and sometimes that goes in the direction of like. It's kind of funny. Sometimes it goes in the direction of like some people sort of have like this epiphany, like, I never really thought about it like that. Or some people go, oh man, like you're kind of like they almost get really emotional, which is good. That's what I want. I mean, not that they're crying or upset or anything, but just to like this point where they're like, okay, it's different. They never really get challenged, right? They're just used to sort of just saying what they say and people going, oh, okay, that's cool. And then maybe getting a conversation started out of that. But I really want to take it further, like at like a human level. Like I'm trying to get really deep with people. And sometimes it's not needed, in some of the workshops I do, it's not designed to do that, and some of them are designed to do that. So it just depends on the situation.
Yeah, and you can work with whoever to understand what kind of maybe business issues you're trying to solve, or ideas or creation that you need to imagine, and it's ways to inject some innovation into the process of coming up with new ideas or coming up with new processes or communication, right?
Yeah, exactly. So what I've done is, initially when I started this, I had this idea that like, okay, I can just customize everything, and then what I realized is when you give people too many options, they just become confused, right? And they're just like, I don't know, this is too hard.
Because you're introducing a concept that they're really not always used to.
Yeah, and so it's like you can tell me about the business problems you're having all day, and there might be 50 of them, right? But it's like, how do we decide exactly what we want to do? But if I sort of take it from okay, I can do everything to I can do these 6 to 10 things, then it becomes much more simple to talk to people about. And so now I'm at the point where I've got stuff that's it's designed to be sort of scenario based, right? And it's strictly just about having a good time, getting away from work for a few hours, and just having fun, but still sort of learning about the people that you're with, your team and whatnot. And that's really like what we would consider like a traditional team building type activity, right? But the next step to that is stuff that is, again, more problem solving based. So you go from like learning about each other to learning from each other, right? And it's amazing to see the different perspectives and ideas. I mean, and again, because you went through this, but just sort of getting that different perspective and thinking on what it is that we're talking about, right? So whether it be workplace culture, whether it be product design, whether it be a particular process, whatever that looks like.
Right. And we worked on company culture and what we are now and what we want to see in the future. And and it was really fascinating to see what everybody added and brought to the table, but then also what they continued to add as we went along and asked more questions and continued on. So it was a good exercise for us.
Yeah, for sure. And again, just kind of going off of that, like I've sort of narrowed this down to a point where it's just it's much more simplified, and it's we're saying like, again, with these workshops specifically, again, I want to expand the business a bit, but just with the workshops, which is again is sort of the bread and butter, if you will, of what I do and why I started it. We're at the point now where it's like, we can do these very laid back, relaxed type workshops, or we can do something that is designed to be an 8-hour all day, just work intensive, and at the end of it, ideally, I don't suspect that in 8 hours anything can be 100% complete necessarily. But by the end of that, my assumption would be is that you're mentally exhausted, but you've got a whole new perspective on something. And that's sort of where I would like to get with all these workshops is that point. But again, it's also about the people involved, right? So if it's just you and me, right, there's only so much I can do with one person. But the more people you get in there, again, we had 6 or 7 of us, I think. And it's amazing, like just what you get out of that. I mean, that's kind of where we're at is
you have certain parameters, you have certain amount of Legos, you have, everyone is given similar tools to work with Lego tools. Yep. And it's some people use pillars and, just like the way that they described what it is that they wanted to see and through their pieces that they created. Yeah. Talk a little bit about what that means to describe what you want to see, because they're talking to the piece rather than to each other. Right.
And so that's sort of where when I say like, in workplaces, right, there's a lot of times where it's like, hey, does anybody have anything to say? Sometimes that can be a little daunting to somebody because it's like, oh man, I got 10 people to say something in front of, and whether you trust them or not, I mean, maybe you just don't necessarily, you don't know how to articulate it, right? And so that way everybody's on the same page, or everybody understands exactly what you're saying. And so what the Legos do for you is it provides what we call psychological safety, right? And so one, it's the fact that when you're building something and then you explain it, I'm not talking to you personally, and even if it is something that's related to, hey, I wish that in our department we could do this more, and I wish that, X person, right, I wish that they would do this, but you're not saying that directly, right? You're sort of generalizing it, but in the sense, though, the Legos are still representative of that person or that thing or whatever. And so it sort of provides this way to allow them to speak without feeling like they're going to be judged necessarily, or that they're saying something that might offend somebody or whatever. But everything is metaphorical in nature, right? And so a minifig might represent a person. 99.9% of the time it does, but I think one of mine had a crown. It was quite nice. But a red brick or a the little flower piece or whatever, right? Whatever it is can represent a million different things. And so it's interesting to see like how people sort of translate that to words, right? So you take something that is, you might look at it and be like, that means nothing to me, but to that person, it means this entire story, right? And so during these workshops, that's exactly the point of it, is to build something and sort of tell your story around that. The point is there's no rules behind it, right? There's no, there's no specific way to say something. It's more like just build it and tell it how you see it, and nobody can tell you anything different. It's yours, right? It's your story. So
you did write a couple things on the board, guidelines that we needed to follow.
Just little guidelines. But I mean, as far as like the bricks and this and whatever you're saying, me as the facilitator and you as the participant, I'm sorry, not you, but the everybody in the workshop cannot tell you that you're wrong, right? Because it's yours. It's 100% yours. Yeah. So I can ask questions about it, and everybody else can, and we can sort of like, again, as a facilitator, I can get very deep with it. Is there a reason you might have done this instead of that? Is there a reason that you put this piece here instead of here? Is there, whenever you explain it, well, let's go off of that. Let's get really deep into that, right? But if somebody comes in and says, no, I don't see it like that, well, that's okay, but they can't necessarily sort of chime in about that at that point. That's something where we can have a discussion about it sort of afterwards, but it's not... Right.
There's no wrong way to build my Legos.
Yeah, during, I mean, everybody's going to have a difference of opinion, right? And that's fine, but if there's no... I mean, and sort of everybody gets their own turn to talk, right? And again, that's the point of this, is it gives everybody their own time. It gives, they get to be on the what is it, the soapbox? Right. Is that the term? Yeah. Right? So they get to be on the soapbox, and they get to say whatever it is they want to say, but they cannot come out directly and say, no, that's wrong. And I've never actually had that problem before, but it's just it's not really a rule, it's a guideline, right?
Yeah.
But I only put that out there because of the fact that there are people that like me, that like to challenge everything, and that's okay. But there's sort of a time and place for it. And then these type things, it's more about just listening rather than having yourself be right. It's not about being right. It's about just listening and understanding everybody's differences.
Getting out of your own way.
Yeah, getting out of well, for you personally,
right?
But also for everybody else, right? It's about like understanding. Okay, that person sees it differently than me. And let me understand why, right? And that's where the Legos come into play, and that's where the metaphors come into play, and all these different things. And so it just allows you to have a more engaging conversation rather than, I've got a lot of really great feedback about some of these things where, somebody will say, I learned more about this person in an hour than I would have in a normal hour-long conversation, because a typical conversation is very surface level, right? And so during something like this, the beauty of it is that we can get sort of as deep as we need to get with it, and by the end of it, you're learning a hell of a lot, right? About that person. And so it's not so much about the Legos themselves as it is more about the right questions and the conversation that you're having and really listening.
Right.
So
you mentioned before that you can come up with all kinds of crazy ideas, but then they sometimes can become the best ideas, right?
Yeah.
So one of the things that happened when we did our session together, we listed out some of the things that we wanted to see in our company culture and, ways to go from where we are now to getting there. But one thing I know that we did implement is now our staff really wanted to see a massage therapist,
cool.
come in and do massage therapy. So guess what? That's what we've been doing.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, that's just one example, and there's others too, but I think it's just a way for people to express their opinions and come up with their ideas, and it's like you said, it's in that safe zone, and no idea is a bad idea.
Right.
Other ideas might be better, but there might not be, and you obviously can prioritize them and everything.
There's a really great technique, and for some reason I cannot remember the guy that started, or at least the guy that became famous for it, but they're called PO statements. I don't know if that term rings a bell. It's something operations. I can't remember what the P stands for. Something operations. Okay. But basically, let's just say, hey, this is our problem, or maybe not even a problem, but this is just
our opportunity.
Or something. There's something random, right? And the goal of it is to, like, literally the first thing that comes to your mind, that's what you say, right? So it could be the most insane thing, right? Like, I'll use Kia as an example, and I love these commercials, by the way, but putting the hamster in the car or whatever. Yeah. Like, I don't know who came up with that. I think it's a great idea. I love the marketing aspect of it. Yeah, I'm sure there were some people that were like, that's insane. Why would we do that?
Why would you have a hamster driving a car?
Yeah, exactly. So something like that where it's like, okay, just think about the wackiest thing, or, the more traditional, more true business oriented thing, or whatever it is, right? You can do that too. It doesn't matter what it is, but again, same things apply. Nobody can tell you you're wrong. There's no judgment necessarily. It's just, let's just put them on the board, right? Let's just put them up there and just see what everybody has to say. And again, it's sort of the same thing where you get like this level of, you get to see everybody's differences, but in a very sort of short way, smaller way, I should say. So anyway, that's just another example, but something that I've also used in a couple of things of just, what's the first thing that comes to your mind, and let's go off of that, So,
Good.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit more about what it's like for you to start a business in 2019. You've got this going now for how long?
Going on 8 months.
Okay.
Something like that.
Good.
Yeah.
You're getting there, right? You're almost to the year mark. That's going to be awesome.
Yeah.
So tell me about some of the things that you've done to start this business, to get the name out there. Like, what are you doing to help market your business?
It's hard because of the nature of the business. It's not something that is incredibly straightforward, unfortunately, and part of that is my fault for not making it that way. I'm trying to simplify, obviously
create a brand essence statement and be able to repeat what it is that you do and articulate it in a way that people understand. I can see how that could be a bit of a challenge. Yeah. Leading with Legos, people think, I'm not going to play with Legos for 6 hours, right?
Yeah.
So you do have a little bit of a challenge in explaining what it is that you do and the results of what you can have from that experience.
Yeah.
I see that.
Yeah.
So what are you doing now? How are you describing what you do?
Yeah, so the simplest thing that I say, and let me just give you a quick backstory. So what I realized is like, okay, every workshop, what's the one thing that it has in common, right? Even though like the subject might be different, the topic that we're talking about might be different, but what's the main thing that it has in common? It all comes down to some form of team building. So for me, that's sort of what I've been going off of is I sort of challenge traditional team building methods, right? I love Basecamp. I think it's the local Basecamp place. I think it's wonderful, right? There's nothing wrong with it. But again, in my mind, what are you really taking away from throwing an axe? Like, how does that help the business, right? And so what I've sort of gone off of is we create epic team building workshops. It's very simple, and at least sort of it leaves like this sort of idea in your head, like, okay, first of all, team building, I know what that is, but what's a team building workshop? And two, why is it epic, right? Like what makes it epic? So there's sort of that side to it. But yeah, I mean, that's what I say in the most simplest form. The other thing too is because of I challenge like traditional team building aspects, and another one would be like the escape rooms. Those are awesome. I've been to them. They're very fun. But again, like what are you really taking away from that at the end of it? I think those would probably be more applicable than some things. But anyway, so like
trying to work together and
working together and whatnot. But again, yeah, I mean, there's sort of like a fine line of like what are you really what are you learning from that situation? So I sort of applied some of that very again hands off scenario based type stuff to Brick6. But really, what I want to focus on is the workshops that allow businesses to get better business results, right? But the other thing I say is join the team building revolution. And I put that out there because of the fact that I think it is, like you mentioned earlier, like this is something that's kind of new, and it's not, most people don't necessarily turn to Legos to solve a problem or to think about something in a unique way or whatever, or to even spark some creativity. They might turn to sticky notes, or I've heard of Play-Doh for some reason. I'm not really sure what the Play-Doh does, but I think it's great idea. But really what I'm doing is, I'm signing up for as many trade shows as I can. That's kind of the biggest thing because I need to have a physical presence. I've looked at radio stuff and whatnot, but again, like how do I really explain it in a very simplistic way on the radio to where everybody's going to be like, oh yeah, I totally just get that. So I'm still trying to figure that out myself, the best way to do it. The most success that I have had though, honestly, I started a meetup group, and it's called Boise Entrepreneurs Unite. And I started a meetup group for the reason of, one, it helps me market my business a little bit, and that sort of leads to, some things here and there. But really what it does is it just kind of puts a face to a name, because there's so many businesses where you're like, oh, that's a great idea, but I have no idea like the human behind that business, right? So for me, that's been something really beneficial, is I've been able to, people understand like this is me, and this is why I do what I do and how I do it and this and that. And so that's led to some good things, but and then
building referral partners and people that come to the group, and then they learn about what you do, and then they can talk to other people.
I'll also come back to that in just a second. But obviously like social media is good. I've had a really tough time on Facebook, I'll be honest with you. I started Facebook like 2 months ago, and it's been really difficult. But part of it is I haven't spent enough time on it. But the other side to it is, I honestly don't have any idea what I'm doing. LinkedIn, on the other hand, though, is great for me, and that's really where I've gotten a lot of good exposure as well. Obviously, people can check on your profile and all that. I mean, we all know how LinkedIn works. Yeah. But the biggest thing for me is like the articles that I write. It's really just a chance for me to challenge something that I've seen in the week or seen, wherever, and I just kind of go, okay, why is it this way? Why can't it be this way? And I tie that back to Brick6 in some way or another, right? So some of the stuff that I've written about were the workshop that I did at BSU, right? Like sort of taking this, I obviously talked about the workshop that I did, but then also talked about like the traditional education in terms of sitting at a desk and staring at a PowerPoint or whatever and doing, whatever work you're doing, versus like, hey, let's just see what these students already know and let's see if we can just go off of that, or what, whatever it is, right? And so that was very interesting. So yeah, that's just kind of a good example. So really, between LinkedIn and like the meetup group that I started, that's been super beneficial. So part of the reason I want to start the group is, these networking groups that we go to, they're fine. I don't have any like complaints about them necessarily, other than what I don't understand is like you get a group of 100 people, however many show up, right? You get 100 people in a room and you're all talking, and some stuff comes out of it, exchange some business cards, this and that. But I really don't like yelling to talk to people, I'll tell you that. I don't like
it. Gets loud.
It gets so loud. So there's that side to it. And two, like I never have really found the opportunity to have like a meaningful conversation with somebody. And so I started this meetup group with the thought of, I just want to talk to people. Like, I don't really care about, like, I want to learn from you and I want to learn more about you and your business and this and that. But I really don't care to learn about, like, more so like your occupation. I mean, I think it's great, but I really want to know, like, what successes that you're having as a result of whatever business you've started. Like, for example, the people that we meet, and I say we, I mean, only because I know that you've been, some of these networking things. But, like, you meet people that are part of the mortgage industry or the real estate industry or in some kind of sales on whatever end, right? And it's kind of all the same. It's like the same conversation every time. It's just a different industry or whatever, right? So for people that have really started a business, those are the people that I'm really interested in talking to, because I want to know really, like, who that person is that started the business, and then what sort of successes and failures, and then hopefully more successes that they've had, what best practices we can share together, and then really just having an interesting conversation, whatever that looks like. And so, yeah, that's been really beneficial to say, the way that I envision this, and I think this is good for everybody, for, all the listeners, is, you have so many resources, and I think we get to, like, this interesting point of time where, you're talking to somebody and you go, oh, who you should go see? You should go see this person.
Right. You
should go talk to this person. You should go do this. You should go do that. But it's like, take the time. Like, imagine if you just took the time to, like, actually become partners with everybody that you knew. Like, if you became your own sort of ambassadors of each other's businesses, imagine what kind of relationships and partnerships and what kind of a business you might be able to generate out of that, right? Because the amount of times, I mean, I think we'd all be rich with the amount of times we've all been told, hey, you need this, go talk to this person. Some
ambassadors of your business, people that are evangelists of your business and your brand and what you're doing, right? That idea.
Yeah. I mean, just in the sense of, like, micro businesses out there, right? That are either, that are just starting, or they're just tiny because of, whatever reason. But, you have a conversation with these people and you're like, wow, that's really cool. I had no idea that you even existed, but what you do is super cool. And I would love to, be a part of that somehow. Right. Yeah. And, you look at these people and whether they, become successful, whatever that version of success looks like to them, whatever you talk about, I think for me, the end goal is, like, is there any way that me personally can help you with something, right? And the other side of that is,
like, the go-giver mentality.
Yeah, I mean,
give, and then potentially you could receive in abundance because of that mentality. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's that side to it too. But, the other thing is, again, I know you're in branding and marketing and all the different things that you do, right? But there's other people that do the same exact thing in other places all over the country. So, we talk about, like, okay, what makes you different? I mean, we can go into all that, but that's not really what I care about. What I care about is more about, okay, you're in my, I guess we'll call it sort of my arsenal, right? Like, I know that this is sort of my preferred person to go to for these types of things, right? And if I meet all these people along the way of sort of my entrepreneurial journey, there's no reason why we can't all be ambassadors and partners of each other's businesses. Because to be like, oh yeah, well, yeah, you're having that problem, well, I know exactly who you should go talk to. Okay, and then you just kind of bypass, like, everything that I might, what if I could have helped you out with that, or whatever, right? And so it's sort of like,
it's a way to help accelerate word of mouth advertising by having the people that can help spread the word,
right? It's these networking groups that they're fine, but, like, I went to what is it BNI? Is that what it is? There's a BNI thing. I got invited to one of the groups, and it was a large group of people, and it was fine. But again, at the end of it, what really happened was, at least for me, wasn't really much of anything, because everything for me was, oh yeah, well, hey, this is who you should go talk to for this particular thing, because everybody, it wasn't a bunch of entrepreneurs, right? It was more about, like, okay, we're in marketing, we're in sales. And yeah, I mean, again, like, if that's the conversation.
More like salespeople selling to salespeople versus
it was kind of like that.
Entrepreneurs and
it was for, like, again, we could all use marketing and sales and social media and branding. I could spend thousands. We could all spend thousands of dollars to improve what we're already doing. But sometimes maybe we don't necessarily need that. Maybe that's what we think is the problem, but maybe it isn't, right? So maybe it's just, like, sort of, again, learning from everybody. And so anyway, to sort of wrap this part of it up, I think for me, that's something that I would recommend to everybody is really to look at the people that you're around on a on a consistent basis. People look at the people that you have.
This. It's called influencer marketing that you can use.
Influencer marketing. Yeah, but I'm not saying like, oh, hey, you should pay them to endorse your brand, or I'm not saying that.
No,
I just mean like really build a relationship with those people and really utilize that asset. Use that information and knowledge and expertise that person has, or that group of people have, or whatever.
Yeah, it's based on trust, right?
Yeah,
the adage that people do business with those that they know, like, and trust. And
if
you can build that trust with them, then ideally they'll return the favor with referrals. And absolutely. And then reward those who do give you referrals, right?
Right. Yeah. Oh, exactly. Yeah. And so anyway, so sum this up. Yeah, for me, it's been that again, we'll call it the referral marketing and whatnot, the trust building, if you will, and then honestly, like if you have something to say about whatever topic it is, even if you're not an expert in it, I would say go on LinkedIn and say it and share it, share your article as many times as you can and get people to engage with it and tie it to your services and to your offerings. For me, that's been really beneficial. Just people going, hey, I just happened to read this article that you wrote, thought I would check in and just see, how you might be able to be of assistance to me. So that's been really cool.
Well, Christian, thank you for sharing all about your marketing and entrepreneurial journey and your business. And hopefully this will also help you accelerate your word of mouth advertising through this podcast, right?
We'll see.
And I also just want to remind you and others to go to the Marketing Expedition members Facebook group, and we can have more conversation there. We'll post the podcast there and other podcasts as well. And thank you very much for joining us
today. Thanks for having me. I talked a ton.
You did good.
And so everybody that's listening, I appreciate you. I appreciate you staying tuned.
Let's give them how to get a hold of you.
Yeah. So my website is www.brick, BRICK6 creative.com.
Excellent. All right. Thanks. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks for listening to the Marketing Expedition podcast. Find more online at peppershock.com.